We have a question here from Antonio Ricci from Italy. What is your take on the rapidly change happening now caused by Covid-19 that companies opens up for working remotely and work from home?
Thank you first and foremost for the question. It's a very relevant question in these times. I think my perspective on it is kind of twofold, both from the perspective of the employee as well as from the employer or the business. Starting with the employee, I would say the development we now see rapidly growing. It actually started before Covid-19, but during the Covid-19 we have seen all over the world actually that more and more people are going into remote work, so to speak. They work from home because of this corona situation, right? I think that's a positive development. It's a development that I said already started before, but now rapidly growing. And if you look into work-life balance, say, it's extremely positive because the employee actually get a more flexible life, you could say, and in that way be more efficient between work and life. Are you a parent, for example? It gives you way more flexibility if you work remotely, right? You can kind of plan your own day better. That's positive. That's very positive. On the positive side of the business is that you will have a workforce, you will have a group of employees that are way more satisfied, more positive, more balanced and in harmony with themselves. That's good for the business. You will also have on the cutting cost side, you will have, you don't need as many square meters office, say, than you did before if half of or all of your employees has a flexible approach to where they work. So a lot of businesses around the globe actually has the chance to cut square meters, office square meters, which will cut their costs, and we've already seen that. Some of the very big companies especially has already closed offices in New York, in London, or in Amsterdam, and many other places. So that's of course positive as well. On the flip side, I believe from the employee's side, you will get some challenges when it comes to being social. And with that I mean it can grow into a situation if you primarily work remotely alone in your flat house, say, that you don't come out a lot and you don't meet your peers and having that social interaction. That can actually grow into mental challenges, depression, and so the company and the individual, the employee has to be very aware of that it doesn't grow into that. Then it would be way more harmonizing and balancing that you actually come more often to work to the office and meet other people as well. So be aware of that part. On the flip side of the business is that if you are Apple, where you already have a culture, where you already have a way of working and clear structures, clear planning, and a certain size in general, I don't think a lot on the negative flip side for the company, other than what I just mentioned for the employee. But if you're a startup, if you are a new business entrepreneur trying to build a successful team, it can be extremely difficult to do so if your people are not together, even physically, because they work remotely. There's a reason that most startups that are based on this kind of approach is never succeeding, or maybe they succeed but they have difficulties to really grow big and grow global. And I think one of the reasons for that is if you want to build success, it requires I would call it an extreme approach to the level of dedication and the level of identification with the company and the company's purpose and the goals in the company. And it requires a strong togetherness, you could say, where you come together and work damn hard for a very long time. And doing that, you will have to prioritize that over everything else. So that's a situation or part of a company's or new business development where you need actually the right crew, the right people that prioritize the company and the company's purpose and goals higher than almost everything else for that certain period, of course, it takes. So in that period, talking about work-life balance or flexibility in work is not a super good approach. Not if you want to become successful with your new brand, a new company, new startup. So I would say the remote approach to how your people work, the employees work, all of you work in a startup, in a new business, I would say is a no-go. But for already set up big businesses, Apple, Nestle, all the big ones, all the big players, I really can see a lot of on the negative flip side. It's mostly positive, especially giving the employees the flexibility to reach a better balance in life, work-life balance and so forth, which might also make them even more efficient in work probably, or maybe not. It's difficult to say anything about that at this time, at this early stage, in this new phenomenon in the world of working remotely. So I would say there is not a clear answer to this, but I would say it really depends on where your business is in its development. And of course it also depends on whether you are an employee or an employer, because you might see it from two different angles or two different perspectives, of course. What we need to do though is to have a balanced approach to this, and a wise approach to this is to be aware of all the nuances and be aware of both sides, both negative and positive sides of it, and account for both sides, whether you're employer or you're employee. You have to take everything into account, and it's not just necessarily a win-win, but it needs to be, and that's my point. You need to look into it and see how can the employee win from this, and therefore how can the employer, the business, the company be supportive to the employee who wants to go in this direction, as well as how can it be a win for the business as well, and for the group and team as well. It's also extremely important, because in day-to-day work it can be difficult sometimes to do work efficient if you are not able of actually meeting with your peers, right? Of course we have different tools today, Slack, say Zoom or Google Meet, all these fantastic tools we can use to have a problem-free communication and so forth. But there are other parts around building something successful that requires more than just a good tool of communication, and one of them is coming together, working damn hard for a long time, and that the team as a whole is the why of the company, is the purpose of the company. That's extreme dedication level we are talking here, and it transcends in many ways. What can I say? It transcends in many ways just talking about culture, or just talking about how do we get from A to B to C and so forth. It transcends the traditional belief of what a business is, I would say, because it requires a unified group identification level in a degree that is difficult to believe possible. But do you do that? Do you get that? Do you do it right? And of course, do you find the right people who can lift that purpose together with you? There are so many nuances into this and perspectives on the matter. But bottom line is, it's a phenomenon that is here to be and stay. It will not disappear again. But what I think we will see as this wave, as this phenomenon is getting into more and more workspaces, companies and so forth, is that we will begin to experience some of these points that I have raised here today, that there are both positive and negative sides of it. And I would say actually, it's not all employees who wants to work remotely. My experience is that a lot of employees actually want that daily interaction, both maybe because they know themselves in a way that they maybe know that they're not able of delivering what they should be and what they're paid for, say, if they sit in their own home. Or it could be simply because they don't want to struggle with the mental consequences that can occur if you're just sitting alone day after day, week after week, month after month, and so forth. So they want that social interaction with the peers in the office, and that's actually something to look forward to, right? That you go to work also. So I think there are so many levels, so it really depends on the individual, what you want, so forth. I know a relatively big group of people I've met around the globe who really live that out and have done for years, being remote in their work. And of course it's possible if you are an entrepreneur, say a digital nomad, say influencer, whatever, or you have a company who allows that you actually travel the world while working at the same time. But one thing there's a certain trait among these people, which is okay, and that is they really prioritize being free, and they really prioritize their own life over work, so to speak, or being an employee, which is also okay. What is not okay, of course, is that if they're working for a company and they're not putting in the work and the hard work that they're being paid for. But of course, that's a challenge between them and the employer, and that's their headache. But that's one thing to be aware of, is if you really want to go remote, remember to live up to your responsibility as well. Don't bullshit the employer you have. Don't bullshit the company you work for, or the team you work for. That's not fair. It's fair that you're given the freedom to work remote, but it's not fair that you bullshit your company. So I would say that from an employee perspective, remember to live up to your responsibility, even though you want a more flexible approach to work, which is good, and wants more work-life balance, so to speak. But remember, you are paid your 7 or 8 or 9 hours of work per day. And it's not okay to say just because you are smart and you can do your work in 2 hours, then you can surf the waves the rest of the day. That's not okay, because you are still paid for putting in 7, 8, 9 hours. Remember that. Remember the level of responsibility. It always goes both ways. Your responsibility towards your workplace as well as your workplace responsibility towards you. Remember, it requires both, because if you are bullshitting your company or your workplace, you are also bullshitting your team, your peers, and you create a foundation where people who actually are able of living up to their responsibility might lose their chance of work remote. I think from the employee perspective, that's a crucial part. From the employer perspective, the company's perspective, it is. If your people want this, if your people requires this, if they need this, you need to listen. You need to be open as a leader, as an entrepreneur, as an employer. You need to be open for this new way of thinking, of this new way of living, because it is the future. For a lot of people, this will be the future. So it will impact your business whether you like it or not. So set up the right structures, the right tools that makes this new way of work-life balance or way of working possible in your company. That's extremely important. So don't build walls, none of the two sides. Don't build walls, build bridges, and find the proper way of solving this, so it will become a win-win. That's the way forward. I hope you can use this very long answer, but this is my thoughts on the matter. I hope you have a nice day. Bye.